Sophia Parra, welcome to the WorkPlay podcast.
I am so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited you're here. I feel like you're just one of those people where I'm like, we like feed off of each other. We've got the same vibe. So I just know that this conversation is going to go in amazing directions for the listeners. But first, can you just let us know who you are, your business, how long you've been in business so we can get some backstory?
Oh my gosh, I would love to. Okay, so first of all, I'm Sophia Parra. Yes, hello. So I'm a marketing strategist, and I have to say that there's been a little bit of an evolution there. I started off as a social media. Actually, I would even say I started off as a social media strategist. I was like pure, like it was back in the day when Instagram was just starting. I was an actress at the time, and I was doing a scene on Blue Bloods. I don't know if you've heard of that TV show. That I was
No, but this is so cool. I didn't know you were an actress. This is
Yes.
amazing.
I mean, and I can't say that I stuck with it very long, but yeah, no, I used to do like TV, right? So it's like little spots. I was never a star or anything like that. Like I said, I didn't stick with it long enough, I don't think. But when I was actually filming Blue Bloods, to take you way back, right? I was filming Blue Bloods. It was one of my first roles, actually, and I was playing a trophy wife. So I was like getting this girl on the street arrested. It was really sad. And funny enough, this clip went viral like a couple months ago, so randomly, even though we filmed it like 10 years ago. It was just really, really random. And someone was talking about this photo album, right, called Instagram. And I was convinced, just based off of looking at it, that this was a public photo album. So I was like, oh, cool. Like, let me just load a picture I have on my phone on my new photo album, because like I loved photos. I had a picture. The picture I took that morning was actually of my husband, now husband, at the time he was my boyfriend, in his underwear and a Knicks jersey, and he was just like cheering for the Knicks because we're New Yorkers. And I posted it on my private, what I thought to be a private photo album. Turns out it's not private. I got so much response to this picture, and I was like, wait, how are people seeing this picture of my husband in his underwear? So, anyways, that's when I figured out, wow, okay, this is a public app, and I feel like there's a lot of power in this. You know what I mean? So I had this just like bug. Suddenly I was like, I want to be creating content. I want to help other people create content. And I was just a social media manager while I was acting, right? So that was kind of like my day job. And I was nannying as my day job at that point. I ended up quitting all the jobs, right? Just doing this. And that evolved into an agency a couple years later where I served 6-figure and 7-figure coaches. And now I serve more like a coach, a marketing strategist and coach, where I help through my program called Pocket CMO. I help other people create marketing strategies and systems that make sense, don't burn you out, take you off of social media if that's just not your jam. You know what I mean? Like I truly believe we can make more decisions about where we want to actually hang out and how we want to market our business, but everyone just assumes you've got to be on social media. So, I try to give people options, and yeah, so that's what I do now.
So this seems like, like you said, an evolution. How long has it actually been from like the time you were acting to now?
Yeah, I was thinking about that the other day. I'm trying to like maybe 7 or 8 years. Like I'm
Okay.
trying to remember when I filmed that episode, right? I think that was about 10 years, but then I don't think I officially started my business until 2 years after that. So that's kind of why I'm like leaning in towards 8 years, but I really wasn't keeping track. I gotta
Okay.
say.
Okay. No,
Yeah.
that makes sense. I want to point that out because I think there's a lot of people that came into the marketing space around like 2020, 2019, right? So it's interesting because it seems like you've seen the space
Yeah.
change and evolve as you've changed and evolved. So I'm interested in hearing, how has that changed? What have you seen? What are the trends from like the
Oh,
beginning
yeah.
to now?
Oh my god, things have changed so much. And I have to say, like, when people say that, a lot of people think like things have changed in a bad way. I really don't. I actually think they've changed in a good way. One big thing is like, I mean, let's just like the elephant in the room. It was a lot easier back then. Do you know what I mean? It was a lot easier to get the things that we think are important. For example, going viral, getting a lot of followers, like those are the things people tend to think are what's really important. And they were a lot easier to get back then. Those things
Mm.
are a lot harder to get now. But I have to say, because they're harder to get now, people are waking up to the fact that, wait a second, maybe that's not what I actually need to have a successful business. Because a lot of people have very successful businesses, are not going viral, do not have 300,000 followers, right? They still have audiences in other ways. Like they're still thinking about growth and getting in front of people, but they have opened their eyes to other ways because social media is so challenging. So for me, I think that's been the biggest thing. Like it used to be, it wasn't a very saturated place. You could throw up content and see something happen, and you felt a lot of validation. Now you can spend a lot of time creating content, not have anything happen, and start to doubt yourself and feel like, oh my gosh, is my business ever going to get off the ground, right? So we are forced to get more creative. We are forced to really understand what actually matters in business. And from my perspective, it's three things, right? It's growth and audience. That has to be about your email list, not your social media following. If your social media following is not aiding in your email list growth, it doesn't even count. Like that's how strong I feel about this, right? The second thing that's important is nurturing. Like, are you having conversations with people? If you are not, your nurturing strategies do not work. Like they have got to be rethought, right? And then finally, of course, sales. Now, if you're just starting out in business, for me, sales is different at different stages of business. So if you've been in business for a long time, sales means actual money in the bank. But if you are just starting out, like it's day 17 of your business, like we probably can't measure sales yet by the money you have in the bank because you're just getting started. You're figuring stuff out. So for me at that stage, sales is about how often you're putting out a clear invitation that forces someone to decide yes or no. And if you're not doing that often enough, like you don't remember the last time that you sent a sales email to your email list or put up an Instagram story saying, this is how to work with me. I have one spot. Let me know if you want it. Like if you're not doing that, you're not selling either. So those are the three pillars for me that matter. And newsflash, like those don't have to happen on social media. So people are really waking up to other avenues of marketing their business.
Yeah, and I'm excited to dive into that whole process. I have a plethora of questions to ask you. I'm interested though to understand the mindset a little bit more of why we think that the followers, the likes, why we think that's going to correlate to sales. Because
Yeah.
I do think that mindset is still prevalent. I know that people coming into the WorkPlay process and our method, they come in guns blazing in terms of like full blown social media likes, followers. And I always caution that because I am in agreement with you that there are so many other pieces to the pie of that. But I'm just curious, like where that mindset comes from so we can start to unravel that in ourselves and see where it's popping up so we can actually get to the point, right? Faster.
Yeah. I mean, you know what? It's anyone's guess in a lot of ways, but I have to say, for me, I think it's because that's what they've been told. Like
Mm.
we still see so much content out there pushing the importance of followers, of going viral, tips to go viral, hooks to go viral. I mean, like all of this content from marketers who are apparently going viral, right? Like because they're positioning it that way and because they're positioning themselves as people who know what they're talking about, like we are automatically going to assume, well, this person knows more than I do because they have more followers or because whatever that might be, right? So we, thanks to other marketers marketing this as the thing you need to do, we are being influenced, and so I understand why it's happening. And also, I feel like there's just as much evidence to the contrary. It's just that those people aren't on social media. And because social media is this place where we do tend to hang out, we do tend to think we need to figure out. So we're spending a lot of time trying to figure it out. We are being exposed to a lot of this misinformation that is keeping us stuck, right? To be
Mm.
honest, is keeping us playing a dated game. Um, a lot like what has always mattered. This has never actually been different. Like even back in the day when going viral mattered, or when I should say when going viral was something people could do easily. the root of everything, the thing that actually matters is your relationship with your audience, right? If you do not have that, it does not matter how many followers you have. It does not matter how many sales you have. Like, you are not going to be moving forward in your business, because people, especially in this day and age with AI, with faceless accounts, like, we do not buy from people that we do not trust, right? So we absolutely have to have strategies or systems in place designed to build relationships with people, and that goes beyond followers, that goes beyond engagement. So what I always say to people is like, okay, you want the followers, you want the engagement, cool, like, let's try to get you that. Then what? Right? And usually when I ask them then what, they have no answer. They have only thought beyond getting the followers or getting the engagement. They haven't thought what comes next. They haven't thought about how they're going to turn into sales. They haven't thought about that because they have no idea. Because the content that we are seeing online doesn't cover that part, right? It's almost like when you watch a rom-com and they live to like happily ever after, but that we don't see like the fight that they had the next day, or like trying to get pregnant and struggling with infertility for 3 years. Like, we don't see the life after the happily ever after moment in a rom-com. It's kind of like what content is doing. It's selling you this dream of going viral, but not actually connecting the dots between going viral and actually getting clients from that. And that's the piece that people don't know and aren't even asking for, because they're so focused on the dream, the happily ever after, which they think is going viral.
It's so true. And I'm so glad that we're diving into this, because I always have thought about it from like a perspective of, and I know that this isn't this isn't a unique take. I have heard people say this. It's like, why aren't you so grateful that you have 100 people in your audience? Like, imagine if you had 100 people in front of you, like, what would you do with those 100 people? Because currently, to your point, you're not really doing anything with them right now. You're just focused on getting more. It's almost like you're
More, yeah.
ignoring the people who are in your audience already, whether it's 10 people or 100 people or 10,000 people. To your point, you're ignoring them. And so
Yeah.
I guess my question to you now is like, all right, we understand that everyone, I think, has people in their audience, right? That they could probably take and use this information on. Now, what is that next step to handling those people, to actually getting them, pushed into a sales funnel or pushed into your offer? Like, what are those next steps? What do we have to actually be focused on?
Yeah. Okay. Well, to be honest, the first question we have to get really clear on is what of our current marketing system, like what we are currently doing with when it comes to our marketing, like what is the role that it is all playing? And like I said, there are only 3 roles that we need to fulfill: the growth role, the nurturing role, and the sales role. Anything else doesn't actually matter if it doesn't lead directly into growth, nurturing, or sales. So again, let's like use social media, for example. If you like were to write a list of all the things that you do every day that takes you hours and hours and hours, like the content you create, the podcasts, the emails that you write, write a list of all the things that you spend time on, and then right next to it, where, like, why, what is that giving you? Is that aiding in your growth? Is that aiding in your nurturing? And is that aiding in your selling? Now you might be like, well, how do I know? Again, if it's aiding in growth, it's adding people to your email list. So if you are spending all that time going viral to get more social media followers, but they are not getting on your email list, either your social media strategy needs to change, or we need to consider, okay, do I have time for social media, or is my time better spent somewhere else? Like, let's just ask the question. Let's just like pose it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Same, and then go down the list, right? For everything, right? So for me, let's just use myself as an example. I did this exercise. I do this exercise every single quarter. And I found out my social media was not aiding and nurturing because it was not creating conversations with my audience. That's the metric that is for success. So I was not getting new conversations. The people that were talking to me were friends, family, collaborators, and existing clients. Like, that was who was actually talking to me. So cannot say that's nurturing. Wasn't aiding in sales either. I mean, sure, maybe indirectly, like in the long run, but typically I can see my sales are coming from that's a strategy. That's a name of a strategy. I call it a branded discovery call strategy. But my sales call strategy, it was coming from that, coming from email list, coming from affiliates. Like, I could see that it was not directly coming from social media. Growth, however, my biggest growth was through collaborations, bundles, summits, getting on podcasts. But then I had to ask myself, but how am I meeting those people? And then I realized I was meeting them on social media, right? So
Mm.
social media didn't play no role, right? It just played a different role than what I thought it played. I thought it was there to help me nurture. I thought it was there. I was posting every day so that people would see me and know who I was. I didn't realize that actually my content was serving my potential collaborators. My potential collaborators saw what I was talking about. They're like, I like her perspectives, right? I like what she's talking about. So when I pitch to them, or if they have a podcast and they invite me, it's because the perspectives I'm sharing are different than what they're hearing other people talk about. So when I realized that I could make a decision, okay, I'm going to use my social media a little bit differently here. I'm going to stop trying to post every single day. I don't need to. My collaborators don't need to see content every single day, right? I'm going to show up, right? I'm going to show up consistently. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be a human. I'm going to share my story. I'm going to be there. I just don't need to burn myself out being there, right? I also realized I've got to get pitching. So I spent more time pitching to podcasts, reaching out to people individually, things like that have podcasts that are potential collaborators. Like that's where I spend most of my energy, because when I do that, we build relationships, which lead to other things, right? So in other words, the type of content I shared changed. I really leaned into my punchy opinions, right? The amount of time that I spent there changed because my collaborators didn't need that much time hanging out on my content. And what I was doing, I was pitching more than just liking random ideal clients posts. So because I broke it all down and I was able to audit kind of the role that social media played, now I got to really understand how it was being used. And when I knew how it was being used, I could, say I'm meeting new people here. Now I'm going on to podcast collaborations that I'm setting up that I'm being invited to. That's where I'm sharing my lead magnet. They're getting onto my email list. I have my sales period X times every year. That's how they're converting. So now I can actually look at my avenue to sales, and I can see that social media plays a step in the beginning, but I do not need to measure my sales success based off of what I'm doing on social media. So now I'm not being unfair to it, and I'm also using it correctly. Does that make sense?
Totally. And I love that you say you're not being unfair to it, because I keep hearing, no matter if it's social media or even like podcasting, I think I've heard this a lot, like, oh, I'm quitting my podcast because it's not giving me sales. Well, what you just said kind of debunked that. You're probably being a little unfair to the marketing activity that you're doing because it's not placed in the right bucket. So that is really interesting. I'm very curious because this year has, I know, been quite a year for a lot of people. Even last year, people were starting to feel like the effects. And, people say, oh, the election this, the election that, it's this or that. And I'm kind of in the boat of like, no, like these outside forces, although they have weight, I want to look at business in a way where it's like, okay, no matter what's coming at us, how can we control what we can control? And so I have been really interested in why I wanted you on this, like the piece of the nurturing, right?
Yeah.
It's like once you figured out where the buckets are, where things are landing, what is that next step? What are some strategies where we can actually start to have those conversations with our people that are in our audience, no matter how big our audience is?
Yeah.
I know for WorkPlay Branding, that's been a huge thing at the forefront of, let's get into for us, it's a little bit different. So much of our business and sales goes through Instagram for specifically our business. And so a huge conversation that we've had is like, how do we have more conversations with our leads, whether it's on social media, whether it's on something else, whether it's like, so what is that nurture piece? What does that look like? Because I think a lot of people miss this.
Yes, they do. And because when I ask people like, hey, what does nurturing mean for you? And just FYI, like one of my sales call strategies, like we have an intake form and I ask that question just for shits and giggles. I'm like, what does nurturing mean for you? Because I'm curious. And everyone says, I really do not think anyone has said a different answer. It's I post consistently and I email consistently. that's what they think nurturing is. But like I said, it's actually about like if nurturing, the point of nurturing is to build relationships. So yes, we can passively send content and hope to God over 3 or 4 years, they eventually decide you're for me. You know what I mean? I've been here for 3 years. I love you. Because that's happened to me. I've had people be like, actually, I've been following you for years. Like, I'm so excited to finally work with you. And I'm sitting here like, 3 years? What the fuck? So it's like, I love it. But also, there are other people who are ready to take faster action, but they don't have the opportunity to. So nurturing is really about giving those people the opportunity to accelerate that relationship so that they're ready to say yes faster to you. So to be honest, there's so many different strategies for this, but I'm going to share two very simple ones that I do consistently. I do this every single quarter, and also a lot of my clients do. And again, it's designed to generate conversation, to build that relationship, and to be able to know what they actually need, so you can make recommendations, you can point them in directions, or they just think of you first when it's time. So one of them I call my Q&A party. I actually used to I used to do this on my text list. I still do it on my text list, but now I do it on my email list as well, because it worked so well on the text list. Actually, fun fact, last year I did a whole case study on my text list Q&A parties, and over the course of 1 year, 100% of the people who took part in the Q&A party on my text list converted over the course of 1 year.
What?
So it doesn't mean they converted right away, but in 1 year, 100% of the people converted, right? And these are in offers that range. I know, it really, really was. These are in offers that range from $3,000 to $7. So there's a lot of like wiggle room in there. So again, it doesn't matter high ticket, low ticket, like someone bought something. Majority of them were higher ticket, because I rarely ever sell that $7 thing. That was just a weird little thing that I did. But all that to say, with that in mind, again, this is about generating conversation. So I do this thing where I send an email to, again, because most people have email lists instead of text lists, I'll give the context for the text list. I send an email on like a random Friday, right? And the email says, the title of the email is something like free coaching today only, right? And the inside of the email, it's, hey, I want to help you break through a roadblock. So hit reply with like a burning hot marketing question, and I'll reply to as many people as I can until 3 p.m., like, or whatever the time is, right? And then I'm like, love, Sophia. P.S. Wondering what kinds of questions to ask? Here's some great examples. So then I give ideas. Please look at my Instagram bio and give me feedback. Please do that. I give them, I feed them very easy questions they can answer. And then I say questions that are not so great because I need more time. Please listen to this podcast episode and tell me what I did wrong. You know what I mean? Like, I make it very clear. This is a great question. This is a not so great question. And then I send the email. What ends up happening is I get people that I've never talked to hit reply and ask me a question like, hey, this is my Instagram page. I'm feeling stuck in my bio. What do you think? Or, hey, my email list, like I've been emailing my list once a month for 7 years and my click rate is low. What do you think I'm doing wrong? Like, things that for me are quite easy to answer. Sure, I might have to go back and forth with them a couple of times, but for the most part, like, this is my expertise, right? I've guided them on the type of questions I can answer them right now. And what I do is I go down the list and I just answer the questions when I can. So it's like I have my whole work day, but I have like breaks where it's like I have like an hour between calls. I'm going to go and I'm going to answer as many emails as I can. I go eat my lunch. I come back. I answer a few emails. Like, I have no obligation to answer all of them, but I can. I'm getting them coming in. So I can answer as many as I can. Now, in the process of that, what I like to do is I like to answer, this is an optional piece, but I think it helps. I like to answer them with bombs. So are you familiar with bombs?
No, please explain.
Okay, it's the best app ever. It basically means like you can reply to an email with a video response, right? So It's like a 3-minute, like you film a video and then it appears like a GIF in the email. So it's just like, hey, I filmed you an answer to your question. And then it's just me like waving at them. And then they hit play and I just start talking in the email. So it's a very easy way to get through as many as you can. And so I will say, like, Lyric, let's just say that you asked me a question. I'll just be like, hey, first of all, this is such a great question, and I'm going to answer it for you. I also want to let you know that I'm not even sure if you're aware of this, but this is exactly what we talk about inside of Pocket CMO. And so if after you hear my answer to your question, you want the link to learn more of that, let me know and I'd be happy to send that to you. You know what I mean? So I'm kind of seeding that right at the beginning, right?
Is that a
Then I
paid that's a paid offer that you're
Pocket
seeding?
CMO is a paid offer. Now, to be clear, I also will recommend something free. It honestly depends on the question, right? If the person is like clearly struggling with something that I sell, I will be like, you should know about this, right? If the person is struggling with something that I just have a free offer or a podcast episode, I instead will say, I got a podcast episode. Let me know if you want the link. But I always ask if they want the link. I don't just send it because, again, the more touches, the more relationship building, right? So I answer the question. It takes me a few minutes and then I go to the next one. And what ends up happening is I'm getting suddenly like, I have so many relationships with the people that are replying to me that day. You know what I mean? Now, if I'm doing this, like I'd like to do this right before a launch oftentimes. So it's like if I'm doing a webinar, I will do a Q&A day the week before a webinar because most of the questions that come through are people that need to be on that webinar. So I can say, by the way, have you signed up for the webinar? And if they're like, yes, I have, I'm coming next week. I'll be like, what day are you coming? I want to see you in the chat. You know what I mean? So I am again training them to not only show up, but also engage, right? So it's all about sparking that relationship so that you are the person. And I have to tell you, like, this has worked wonders for people with small email lists who are not there with like 100,000 people. You know what I mean? Whether they're getting started or they've been around for a long time, but maybe like they just didn't focus on email list growth, which is so many of us, you know? This accelerates relationships so that link clicks go up, so that people actually know you, are thinking about you, so that you know who to invite. Like when I have campaigns, I think about all the people who ask me questions and I like go through them. Who would be a great fit for this campaign that I'm doing, for this free offer that I'm giving out? So it gives you information and it builds that relationship between you and the person who's responding.
So genius. I have a very specific question about uh how you're posing the question or like positioning the questions that they ask you, because one of my thought processes in implementing something like this is like, well, what if they start talking to me about something that I don't help them with, or that's not really my expertise? So are you strategically creating the questions to be positioned like what you're telling them to ask you, or
Yeah.
proposing that they ask you? Is there like a strategy in how those are framed?
Yeah. I mean, I think that there sometimes might need some testing here, right? Because
Mm.
I do know that when I first started, there were a couple questions that came through and I was like, what? How am I going to answer this in an email? Do you know what I mean? So I had to learn for me what were the questions that were actually answerable. And
Mm.
if I needed the answer, if like I was going to answer that question, like what information I needed from them in that first email to be able to answer it. So I had to figure that out. But yes, that is exactly why I give example questions, right?
Mm.
Because
Mhm.
from my experience asking this and getting some funny questions, I can now say, this is like when I write the questions, I'm like, here's like great questions to ask. And I obviously give those examples. But then in my section where I'm like, here are not so great questions to ask, I also explain why they're not a great question. So for example, one of them was, I did get, this is a real question. She said, hey, like, here's what's going on in my paid ad strategy and I'm not really sure what I'm doing wrong. Can you advise? I put that in the not great to ask question. And then I said in parentheses and I bolded it, I can't answer this question because I don't work in paid marketing. I specialize in organic marketing, but if you need a referral, you can let me know. So it's just like I give examples of questions that won't work and then I share why they won't work so that they've got more information and they can think of other questions that might not work based off of those examples.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And are you structuring the email almost to like, I just want to be aware because you work in this like massive industry of marketing, right?
Yes.
Whereas like some people listening might be working in a very like niche like industry. So are
Mm-hmm.
you posing like the subject matter like strategically? I'm assuming so in the actual email. Like I'm answering all questions about XYZ in this
Yeah.
industry.
I can. So I
Okay.
actually changed that up. My program, Pocket CMO, is very broad, right? It's very much about coming up with your specific marketing system. So because of what I sell, I actually like to have people share the questions that they want to ask, because it gives me an idea of what they're struggling with, how to kind of frame the invitation into Pocket CMO later. If I'm like they're a perfect fit, I can actually frame it from the perspective of what they asked me. But I will say, like, when I have a social media membership. It's not my focus, but like I have something that, like, if people are really struggling with social media, like I do have a social media much lower ticket membership. And so if I wanted to sell that, if that was my big objective, I might specifically say, what are your social media marketing questions? And then do the entire exact same strategy, but really be specific about this being a social media like question. Now, when
Mm.
I had a webinar, I do this webinar called the 38-minute content solution. When I was promoting that webinar, I did a Q&A day specifically about content. So I was like, today only, you can pick one post on your Instagram and send it to me for feedback, right? So I changed it to be a feedback, like a content feedback Q&A day. So you can absolutely play here. I will give you another example. This is a woman inside of Pocket CMO, actually. She is, her name is Jackie, and she has a tapping membership, right? So she actually helps people with tapping. And one thing that we realized with her is that Q&A day for her could be really hard. I think she tried a Q&A day before she signed up for Pocket CMO. She listened to me talk about this on a podcast, so she tried it. And the questions were really hard to answer, right? Because they were so broad, and she helps with tapping, and it was like hard to kind of bring it back to tapping. So instead, we've changed the strategy. And instead, you can basically request, like, what's the icky feeling you're feeling right now? Are you overwhelmed? Are you stressed? Are you, are you sad? Are you frustrated? Like, we can give some key relatable experiences that they're having. So the idea is they're going to hit reply to that email telling her what experience they're in, and she's going to reply back with a custom tapping for that experience, right? So we've modified it to fit with her industry, but it's still simple for them to do, which is the point. But for her, it also ties more back to what she actually sells.
Oh my gosh. I love this. And I am seeing a really key correlation to how WorkPlay members are going through this process, creating quarterly campaigns and this. And the reason being, I think it's so strong is because what you're getting from this is data. You're getting information from your audience so you can better market to them as well
Yes.
as nurture them. But you're actually getting a ton of data. You're getting their pain points, you're getting their desires, not only understanding that specific person, but then you're able to kind of see overall the industry trend that you're serving and your audience in that. And so, how I'm seeing this being correlated into WorkPlay members is like, if you are implementing the strategy, which I 100% think you should. I know WorkPlay is about to, we're about to implement this next month. This is so good. Um, you're almost able to, if you do this before a campaign, before you actually get on a creative direction call with our creative directors, you're going to have so much data for them to then craft a visual strategy that is so connected to your audience. I'm seeing such a large correlation with that. So that is very interesting. And I'm like a visual person. I'm like, I need to brand the shit out of this like Q&A party. Like, you could make a whole campaign just for this and implement this as its own campaign.
Yes.
There's so many ways to make this a thing and
Yeah.
integrate it. This is so good.
Yeah, 100%. And that's actually why, I started it for market research, which is, I think, hilarious when I think about it now. Like, the sales that ended up happening from it, that's not why I did it. I did it because of the market research. Like, I wanted to know what people were asked, like what questions they had, like what they were feeling stuck on. Like, that's the only thing I really cared about. And then as the questions were coming through, I'm naturally like this. Like, I think part because I am a marketer, like, I'm always, when I'm having conversations with potential clients, I am thinking, what would I recommend? Like, what would be my next best step for them? So I'm just naturally thinking about that. So I noticed myself doing that. I was just like, wow, what a great question. You should absolutely think about X, Y, and Z. Let me answer your question. It was just off the cuff just started to happen kind of thing. But what
Mm.
ended up happening then is, yes, I got my market research. Yes, I seeded the shit out of my offers, free and paid, right? So now people are taking next steps with me, right? That connection with the person always led to a next step, free or paid, because now I had a relationship with them. And
Yeah.
that always ended up, as you can see from the data last year, making a sale, right? But that is the key here, right? It's about building relationships with your audience. And I do feel like I have to stress that, because the one thing that people can get wrong here is approaching this with the purpose of making a sale instead of building a relationship, right? The sales can happen, but the relationship has to happen first. So if you come to it with the right intention, it'll happen naturally. But if you come to it with the wrong intention, you might actually cockblock yourself.
Okay, yes, this was actually going to be one of my final questions for you of like, okay, how do we send this home to the end of our funnel, the sales piece of this? I think that are like, is there a strategy when you're talking to them um that allows you to seed it even better or optimize the seeding? I know that you talked about, okay, before you answer the question, hey, have you
Yeah.
heard about this offer? But once you've built the relationship, I almost think about it from a dating perspective, like how do you go from like how do you get out of the friend zone? How do you get out
Yeah.
of the almost like the pen pal zone where it's like, okay, we're just talking back and forth. Um how do we progress the relationship? Is there,
Yes.
a few strategies that you could give us?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, first things first, if we look at the nurturing event as a true nurturing event, so it's about building that relationship, right? So, personally speaking, like I do set boundaries around this. So, I do not sit on my email going back and forth all day with the same person. I'm very clear once I've answered the question, they cannot ask another one. Right. And
Mhm.
I don't necessarily say email them and say, you cannot ask another question. Goodbye. Like I don't do anything like that. But I also like in the email when I set it up, I do make it very clear, like you can ask me one question between these hours. I will stop at this point and I will answer as many as I possibly can. And with how I word it, people respect that, right? And if they ask more than one question in their email, I will say, hey, I am so excited that this opportunity excites you. And I would love to answer all of these questions, but I can only answer one. So which one would you like me to answer? So I do ask that, and I like make that all very clear. So step one, really do stick to those boundaries, because that is going to make it clear that no, we're actually not friends, right? I am the expert. I am the authority. You know what I mean? You are asking me a question and I am so graciously giving you my time, and I am here to answer them, and I want to support you. I want to see you on that next level, but we are also not friends, right? I do think that that matters,
I
doesn't mean you
agree.
can't be friendly, but you're just not friends, right? So that way you're going to get as many as you possibly can, and people are going to respect your boundaries and also see you that way, which I think is key here.
Yep.
Now, at that point, of course, you're going to do the seeding, right? You're going to seed your offer. Like I said, I mentioned at the beginning, I answer them the question, and then I say it again at the end. I'm like, okay, so let me know if that was helpful. Also, do let me know if you want that link, because I can send it to you right now. Right. So now it's a reminder, but I don't just give it to them. I do ask them to ask me for it. Again, it's a back and forth. It's a touch point. It just makes an opportunity to like for them to actually say, yes, I want this, because that is powerful. Them telling themselves they want it is very, very powerful versus you just giving it to them and then them feeling like you just like pushed it on them. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So that's the
Hmm.
second thing. Now, the third thing is typically I will say this does work wonders because people build a relationship with you, right? So 9 times out of 10, maybe 9.9 times out of 10, they take action on whatever the thing is because they feel so seen by you. They're like, damn, I have never actually had someone like look at my stuff who I don't know, look at my stuff and actually give me unique to me advice. It's all cookie cutter on the internet, right? So because of that experience, they want to take action. But let's just say they don't, or maybe they take action, but it doesn't result in anything, right? After I'm done, I ask my OBM or an OVA or someone to go back into that email thread and write down everyone that asked me a question. So we have like an ongoing like document or spreadsheet where it's like so and so at this email address asked this question. So it's like we kind of just like keep track, right? And then at that moment, I have like a thought, oh, they might be good for this. They might be good for that. Like I kind of have a thought about that recommendation, right? So I have someone else write that all out. And so when I am promoting something, when I do a campaign, when I just would like a client as quickly as possible, I go back to that spreadsheet. This is my warm list of people. And I personally reach out to them and invite them into something. Hey, I'm doing free client attraction audits for you to help you experience Pocket CMO. I know you asked me this question a couple months ago. It could be a really great opportunity for us to dive even deeper into what I've talked about. What do you think? I'm not even kidding. I don't think I've ever had a no, right? And most of them have become clients. I have an 80% conversion rate on my sales call, right? So that invitation converts. So that's kind of how I approach that next step.
That is so good to hear. And I'm glad that you brought in that data of like the 80% conversion rate, because that's always like a question, like how much did this raise your conversion rate? Because if you look at raising the conversion rates, you then don't have to have so much traffic. You then don't
Exactly.
have to have such a big audience. And I think this is kind of coming full circle in our conversation. It's like when you're focused on the nurture piece of it, your campaigns do better. It honestly feels like less work, to be honest, and more fulfilling work, right? Because you're making these relationships and getting like that strong connection with your audience. And and this is why I wanted to have you on, because I just think that this strategy can completely blow visual campaigns that people are creating out of the water. It's like, how do we optimize what you're already doing right now? When you're launching that visual campaign, how do we make sure that is so good and it's going to be so successful? Because you've already created beautiful visuals for it. You've done the process. You're doing it on a quarterly basis. Now, how do we optimize the content that you've already created? And I think this is a perfect strategy. It's easy, it's simple. Thank you so much, Sophia, for coming on. This has
You're
been
so
such a
welcome.
treat, honestly.
Oh,
Thank
you're
you.
so welcome. I'm so glad to hear that.
Where can everyone find you, connect with you? I mean, like, I want to see these Q&A parties in action. Like, where can we get on your email list?
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, first of all, you absolutely know about my podcast, Marketing Unfiltered. Lyric is actually going to be on a very soon to be episode. So we had a very hot and fiery conversation over there. So definitely get over there. I also saw a really great next step for people. Actually, the audit that I was talking about, really understanding the role that your things are playing within your marketing system. I actually have a video walking people through how to do that. So, oh my God, I think the link is like, I don't know. I'm going to give you the link and we can put it on the show notes because I was like, I have no fucking idea.
I love it. See, we want to get to where you're at, Sophia, where you're like, I don't know what the link is. I know it's there. Like, this is inspiring.
Yeah, and if for some reason like you can't find it, like you can also always message me on Instagram and I will share it with you. But if you sign up for that, like you can take the audit. I mean, you'll get a lot of clarity on it's a 25-minute video. You'll get a lot of clarity on your own marketing system. And then you'll also be on my email list because I have to say I share good shit every Tuesday. And then we have Q&A parties as well, so you can see them in action.
I'm obsessed, and we'll make sure to put the link in the show notes so that it's super easy. But also go DM Sophia. She's amazing. Thank you, Sophia. I'm so happy you came on.
Oh, thank you for having me.